Can we just jump back? Because someone asked, can we have a converter talk? I don't really want to do a whole thing on converters, but I want to say one thing about them because I definitely just kind of snuck that in about the Apollo.
Yeah.
I have an issue with all-in-one boxes, right? Things that do more than one thing that a lot of other companies or certain companies will specialize in, right? So and let's put a monetary, like a number on this. If you're spending $2,000 on an Apollo and it has 4 built-in preamps, it has a monitor controller built in, it has 8 inputs and outputs of conversion happening with more possibilities for expansion depending on the cards. It has a headphone amp, like all these all-in-one things, or most of them, at a certain price point, you just can't get the maximized version of each of them in that box, right? It fundamentally just won't fit in a sense. I think that the Lynx Aurora has gotten, they have no preamps in there, but they have a card for it. So there's expansion in there, but it doesn't have a monitor controller built in. It has headphone amp. So you're sacrificing a couple, and that price point is double the price of an Apollo. It's like it probably starts at $3,800, I think, or $4,000 for those things.
Yeah,
if you're talking about these cheaper, if you're talking about these cheaper all-in-one things, you're getting some sort of distortion. By default, it's just cheaper components. They're going to distort earlier. So there's nothing wrong with this getting started. But when you're at a professional level of output and you can afford these things, those are the first things I would upgrade. These things that induce unwanted distortion. And back to bridging the gap between good guitar sound and
let's also define here. You probably wouldn't say that for someone who's a songwriter producer. You're talking about mixing. I'm
talking about anybody that's operating on a high level. Maybe not a top liner that's only recording a quick demo. No.
You think it's worth it for
everybody
me to spend $4,000 on converters?
Yes. Because you're making something that is going to sound done at one point. The closer it sounds to done in the beginning, the more clear vision it has to not be overproduced, to not need to go through extra steps of trying to find clarity because you're not building up the conversion, right?
Yeah, I think everybody.
This is
one of the few places where you and I probably disagree. I think unless I have a 6-figure investment in a studio, I don't think $4,000 on converters versus $2,000 on Apollo is worth the money. I think that extra $4,000 is better spent on keyboards, on fun things, on creative tools. But you and I can disagree on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a right or. I think they are all important. So to deem one more important than the other,
if you gave me an extra $2,000 to put in my studio, I'm buying another keyboard or something fun to play with. I'd probably do that 10 more times before I buy new converters.
Yeah. What if you have a keyboard that gives you that you use more than others most of the time, that already gives you the creative juice that you need, and you think you need more when a better converter could also do a job of bringing more clarity to that synth that gives you more inspiration, more findings, more nuance.
And maybe if I did some A/Bs with converters and I heard a keyboard through a converter's better than the Apollo, all of a sudden I'd be like, holy shit, this is night and day better.
A Moog through an Apollo and a Moog through the Aurora is a completely different Moog. I have done it, so I'm going to speak on behalf of having done it.
I've done versions of that in the past.
Not even a comparison.
Not in years, and it wasn't enough of a difference for me to want to change. But
sure,
we may do that in the future, and I might be convinced otherwise.
Such a dramatic difference in the amount of low end, because it changes from a square wave to a sine wave. When you're trying, why would you want a convert? This is my argument against it. And then if it's not that big of a difference, it's like you're putting a beautiful long sine wave that gives you like an 808 drum machine. Like if you're actually using a real 808 or a Moog, for example, these are beautiful sine waves that have extended bottom, and you're going to square up those waves and get rid of low end before you've decided on how much low end you want. You're not going to need to. It's a step closer to the final final product, because you're not going to need to boost low end on your Moog. If you're getting the true low end of the Moog, you're going to be like, oh, this sounds better already. So you're not going to fuck with an EQ and then box yourself in, because you're not a mixer, and not you are, but someone that's not a mixer is going to think like, oh, I need more low end. How do I get this? It's like, wait, but if I just captured the Moog has the right amount of low end, but you're distorting the Moog through an Apollo or a
look. I mean, as
Apogee.
you describe it, you're absolutely right. I've just not had that experience hearing things, but so maybe I need to just hear it. I mean, hear them together.
It's when you finally get monitors that show distortion more vividly. Yeah, you're wondering where it's coming from. And
let's get those PMs, the unfucking studio guys, get them over here.
You start to, seriously though, it's impossible to unhear once you hear it.
Yeah,
and then it's a visual thing too. Like send a Moog through an Apollo, send it through an Aurora, and you'll see the wave is different.
I cannot wait to do this. I cannot wait to do this.
So anyway, it always goes back to monitoring, exactly what Michael just said there. It always goes back to that. And you can't hear the difference if you don't have the proper monitoring to hear the difference. And to say that it doesn't matter as a producer versus a mixer, it's like...
I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Just if you're spending a few $1,000s on something, I think for most people, that money, unless you're at a really high level where you have a lot of budget, I think that money... I
specified, though, in the beginning of this conversation that I'm talking about if you're operating on a high level and budget is not quite the issue, then I think you should... That's what I started up by saying, just to clarify. I'm not saying the person that has $300 in their pocket and needs a converter, a USB converter, to even get audio to be heard out of a computer, like, get yourself an Apollo Twin and let's get started.
I guess I probably just wanted to jump in with to clarify that you're doing it with that premise. So not just mixers, but producers as well, but people with a huge amount of budget. Because I know there's a lot of people, we get questions about, do you like an SM7? And these are not people that have an extra few $1,000s to buy converters, but I can't wait to do that.
It's definitely something. Converters are not something that should be super geeked out on and thought of too much, like on gear sluts in the engineer community. I think a lot of the engineers go way too far in this, but there are better ones than others. And we should distill down which ones they are and then pick one. If you're in this,
you should bring some converters over when you come by.
Well, the company would have to give them to you because I can't take them out of my rack. There's going to be no downtime here. But this is something to care about as early as possible. That's why I'm kind of fighting back on it doesn't matter early on. Is like it should be considered that you want to upgrade, so it doesn't become the foundation of your rig, and you're just like, well, now I have it. It's like,
well, and your rig, the fidelity of your rig is only as good as the weakest link in the chain.
Exactly.
So if you have everything that's exceptional and you have shit converters, they're going through that pipe at some point, so everything's coming out with that fidelity. So that's again talking about, maybe we should do a whole episode on staging, signal flow, and all that.
Also, producers generally create in rooms that don't sound the best until they've been in a room that does sound the best, and then they want it, right?
I agree with both of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, but you hear stories, like, especially when I talk to Spider when he's doing a PMC room, and so big name producer finally putting their first studio together, and they're from the ground up, and you're like, oh, that's what they've wanted the whole time. So people are making greatness despite the bad room, not because of it, and despite the bad converters, not because of it. So to think that you can do it that way, sure, you could to a degree. But a lot of people are doing it, again, despite it, not because of it.
Yeah.